Maharaj, all the way from Mauritius. I think Maharaj is stationed in Mauritius for this COVID-19 period. So, Maharaj, we are very, very happy to have you, that you give us this precious time of yours. And we are eager to hear the Pre-Radhastami lecture from Your Holiness. Haribol, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimati Radharani ki jai. Shri Shri Radhesham ki jai. Hare Krishna. So, over to His Holiness, Bhakti Brhat Bhagavata Maharaj. All the devotees can keep your those of us who are on Zoom, keep your mic muted, and your video also off. We'll be seeing Maharaj, of course. Maharaj will have his video on. So Maharaj, we are ready. Over to you. Hare Krishna.
Now, can you hear me? Is it clear? The sound has to be improved or what? Tell me.
Yes, Maharaj, we are hearing you clear.
Should I increase the volume from my side or it's all right?
A little, if you can increase a little, will be good.
Is that better now?
Yes, Maharaj, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Okay. So I'm happy to be of service to all of you there in Guyana. It's a small world right now, and it's nice to take association, if not in person, but at least over this social media. I'm going to read from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, so you can repeat after me. I mean, with me would be okay. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. So Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, we are on the Adi Leela, it says chapter 4, and we're going to read from text number 56. And the verse is as follows. Radha Krishna Eka Atma Dohi Dehadari Anyonye Vilase Rasa Ashvadana Kari. The translation, and there's a purport by Srila Prabhupada. The translation. Radha and Krishna are one and the same, but they have assumed two bodies. Thus they enjoy each other, tasting the mellows of love. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada tells us, the two transcendentalists, Radha and Krishna, are a puzzle to materialists. The above description of Radha and Krishna from the diary of Srila Swarup Damodar Goswami is a condensed explanation, but one needs great spiritual insight to understand the mystery of these two personalities. One is enjoying in two. Shri Krishna is the potent factor, and Srimati Radharani is the internal potency. According to Vedanta philosophy, there is no difference between the potent and potency. They are identical. We cannot differentiate between one and the other any more than we can separate fire from heat. Excuse me. Everything in the Absolute is inconceivable in relative existence. Therefore, in relative cognizance, it is very difficult to assimilate this truth of the oneness between the potent and the potency. The philosophy of inconceivable oneness and difference propounded by Lord Chaitanya is the only source of understanding for such intricacies of transcendence. In fact, Radharani is the internal potency of Sri Krishna, and she eternally intensifies the pleasure of Sri Krishna. Impersonalists cannot understand this without the help of a Maha-Bhagavata devotee. Excuse me. The very name Radha suggests that she is eternally the topmost mistress of the comforts of Sri Krishna. As such, she is the medium transmitting the living entity's service to Sri Krishna. Devotees in Vrindavan therefore seek the mercy of Srimati Radharani in order to be recognized as loving servitors of Sri Krishna. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally approaches the fallen conditioned souls of the Iron Age to deliver the highest principle of transcendental relationships with the Lord. The activities of Lord Chaitanya are primarily in the role of the pleasure-giving portion of his internal potency. The absolute personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, is the omnipotent form of transcendental existence, knowledge and bliss in full. His internal potency is exhibited first as Sat, or existence, or in other words, as the portion that expands the existence function of the Lord. The same potency, while displaying full knowledge, is called Chit or Samvit, which expands the transcendental forms of the Lord. Finally, the same potency, while playing as a pleasure-giving medium, is known as a Ladini, or the transcendental blissful potency. Thus, the Lord manifests his internal potency in three transcendental divisions. Mama Jnana Atimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanabhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We see that Srila Prabhupada sometimes tells some pastimes of Krishna and Srimati Radharani that may not be sort of sourced out even from the commentaries and works of the previous acharyas. So in a talk with Bob Cohen, who later became initiated by Srila Prabhupada as Brahma Tirtha Das, and Prabhupada with their talks with Bob Cohen or Brahma Tirtha Das, it manifested the book called Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers. So in that particular conversation with Srila Prabhupada and Bob Cohen, Bob asked a question to Srila Prabhupada, that is Krishna attractive to rascals? Like that. And Srila Prabhupada said, oh yes, actually Krishna is the greatest rascal. So Bob asked, so how is this? And Srila Prabhupada laughingly said, because Krishna is always teasing the gopis. So Shyamasundar Prabhu, Prabhupada's early disciple, he said, teasing? And Srila Prabhupada said, yes. That Radharani would go, and because she was apparently married to Krishna's shadow called Abhimanyu, and when Radharani would go, Prabhupada said Krishna will attack her. And when Radharani falls down, then Radharani begs Krishna, oh please don't torture me in this way. And then she will fall down again. And then Krishna takes the opportunity. Very rarely Srila Prabhupada says this. And Krishna takes the opportunity and kisses her. And then Prabhupada starts laughing. So superficially, you could say, Krishna is the greatest rascal. And internally, Radharani was pleased, but externally she was displeased. So the way Srila Prabhupada was speaking, it's as if that, the male and female factor, or between boy and girl, or young adult male and young adult female, and the way he was speaking is as if it's like that in the material world also. But actually, it's not like that. So Srila Prabhupada says that unless rascaldom is not in Krishna, how rascaldom can exist, in the first place? Because everything originates from Krishna. So therefore, the Srila Prabhupada said that Krishna is the source of everything. He's the source of everything. But his rascaldom is so nice that everyone worships Krishna for his rascaldom. And in another place, Prabhupada said that like Krishna is worshipped as Makanchor, a thief who steals. Like example, butter. Now, just to sort of reconcile what I just discussed, that Radha Krishna Leela is not like ordinary association of boys and girls, which is kind of abominable in the material world. So just to establish that fact a little bit, I want to discuss the originality before Radharani appears in Raval in the forest of Mahavan in Vrajmandala. Now, in Goloka Vrindavan itself, Radha and Krishna are eternally so, and they do not have what is called a janma, or some type of appearance or birth. So there was a conversation between Radha and Krishna, and Krishna apparently explained to Radharani that, we need to go somewhere else because I'm being called there. So this is given in detail in a scripture called Sri Garga Samhita. Sorry. And in Garga Samhita, in Canto 2, in volume 1, in text 7 and 8, Radharani speaks a verse in Goloka Vrindavan to Shyamasundar, who's Krishna. And there Srimati Radharani says that Yatra Vrindavanam which indicates that wherever there is Vrindavan, and then she uses the word Nasti. Nasti means if there's no Vrindavan there. See? And then she says, Na yatra Yamuna Nadi. So that indicates that if there's no Vrindavan, and Yamuna Nadi means the Yamuna River, Na yatra means, and if there's no Yamuna River, like that, and then Radharani says, Yatra Govardhano Nasti. And yet indicates, and if there's no Govardhan hill, then Tatra me na manaha sukham. In other words, then I cannot be happy in such a place. I cannot be happy in such a place. So we can understand from this particular verse by Srimati Radharani in the Garga Samhita that when she says that my heart, I cannot be happy in a place where there's no Vrindavan forest, where there's no Yamuna river, and where there's no Govardhan hill. But she is addressing like this, Yatra Vrindavanam Nasti, Na Yatra Yamuna Nadi, Yatra Govardhana Nasti. In other words, she's addressing Krishna, who is her life and soul. So how is it that she's telling Krishna that wherever you want to take me, that's all right. But if there's no Govardhan hill, if there's no Yamuna river, and there's no Vrindavan forest, I am not going to that particular place. But this is in Goloka Vrindavan. And in Goloka Vrindavan, there is Govardhan hill, there is Yamuna, and there is the Vrindavan forest. Because within the Vrindavan forest is Yamuna, and within the Vrindavan forest is also Govardhan hill. So the question may arise in Goloka Vrindavan, when Srimati Radharani is addressing Krishna like this, she is a little bit confused, because in Goloka Vrindavan, these places, Govardhan, Yamuna, and Vrindavan forest, exist. So where is Krishna trying to take me to? Because I will not go to any other place except this place where these personalities of Vrindavan, forest, Yamuna, and Govardhan are there. So she was a little bit confused. So in other words, what did Krishna do thereafter? Prior to his descent and prior to Radharani's descent or appearance in this Boma Vrajmandala or Boma Vrindavan, Krishna sent a portion of the Vrindavan forest and a portion of the Yamuna river as well as Govardhan hill to this Boma Vrindavan, which is near New Delhi. So Krishna promised her that wherever these places are, you will be there with me. So this indicates that Radhastami or Sri Krishna Janmastami is being prepared by Krishna and by Srimati Radharani to appear in this world. At the same time, they exist eternally, not to appear. So that's a little bit sort of like esoteric to kind of understand right in this beginning stage of my class today. Now, another aspect to understand basically is that in the purport and in verses to come in this particular chapter, in chapter 4 of the Adi Leela, is that Srila Prabhupada gives a nice analogy. He says fire and heat. Now, obviously, fire may be there and it emanates heat and light. But you and I, we cannot directly associate with fire as much as we cannot directly associate with the sun. So when the sun gives heat and light, as well as when the fire gives heat and light, then the heat from the fire, as well as the light, and the heat and the sun's rays from the sun, it is conducive and temperamental for our bodily, you could say, needs to get nutrition from. In other words, we are indirectly associating with fire or the sun through the heat and light. But directly associating with fire or the sun, we will not exist anymore. We'll be kind of disappearing, we'll be destroyed. So Srila Prabhupada gives the example of heat and fire. And he mentions that without the fire, there cannot be heat. And without the heat, we cannot associate with fire. See? So Srila Prabhupada says in the same way that Radha and Krishna are one supreme soul, but they have, you could say, transformed into two for the sake of ras, or enjoyment. Now, in a similar way, the heat comes from fire, or the heat comes from sun. So we cannot associate directly with the sun, but through the heat, we feel the, you could say, association of the sun, or through the heat, we feel the association of the fire. Now, here's an interesting point. Although fire or the sun gives heat, but the fire or the sun, they cannot experience their own heat. You have to digest that. It's a practical understanding. So similarly, although Radha, who's like the heat, comes from Krishna, who's the sun or the fire, still Krishna cannot experience Radha's love for Krishna, just as the fire cannot experience its own heat that is emanating to others to experience, to indirectly associate with the fire. So this is the most important factor for us, that in order to associate with Krishna, we have to associate with Krishna through the medium of Srimati Radharani, just as we associate with fire through the medium of heat. And then Srila Prabhupada gives another important factor here, that you cannot separate heat from fire, as much as you cannot separate the sunshine or heat from the sun. So similarly, Radha and Krishna are one supreme soul in two forms, and therefore you could say in one sense, the heat that is emanating from the fire is the compassionate nature of fire. So therefore Srila Prabhupada says in other places that Srimati Radharani is the compassionate nature of Krishna. So you can imagine that. It's actually unfathomable to even imagine it in that way. So therefore, by the mercy of Srimati Radharani, only by the mercy of Srimati Radharani, we can be allowed to associate with Krishna. Just as by the mercy of the heat, we are allowed to associate with fire and not directly with the fire. So that's the actual, you could say, position of Srimati Radharani, which is quite different from like a girl's association with a boy in the material world. Because the girl is different. She doesn't emanate from the boy. Whereas Radharani expands from Krishna for the sake of rasa or pleasure. But they are one supreme soul in two forms. Whereas in the material world, no male and female are one supreme soul, manifested in two forms. They are different souls. So therefore, their association with each other on the material platform, in material bodies especially, is short-lived. Short-lived means cut off at the time of death. Whereas Radha and Krishna is not the case. They are eternally so, as one supreme soul in two forms for the sake of Leela or for the sake of pleasure, or for the sake of play. This is the understanding. Now, Srila Prabhupada had one nice, wonderful gentleman who used to come and see him, practically a Vaishnava from birth. And he was younger then, but he was the son of a very wealthy industrialist. And he himself took over his father's business. And he had a PhD in sort of business enterprises. And his name was Dr. N.D. Desai. And later on, he took initiation and he became known as Srinathji Das. He's late now and he comes from Mumbai. So when Srila Prabhupada was leaving Mumbai on his last journey to go to Vrindavan and, in one sense, wind up his pastimes in 1977. This particular devotee, Srinathji, at that time, drove Srila Prabhupada to the train station where there was a one complete coach reserved for Srila Prabhupada to go to Mathura and then over to Vrindavan. So prior to that, Srinathji Prabhu had much association also with Srila Prabhupada. And one time, several newspaper reporters came to interview Srila Prabhupada from the leading newspapers of Bombay at that time. And the interview was being conducted in Hindi. And Srinathji Prabhu was present for that interview with Srila Prabhupada, of course with other disciples there. So two of the newspaper reporters were like more vocal by asking questions to Srila Prabhupada. And one of them was a female-bodied newspaper reporter, and the other was the male-bodied newspaper reporter who was more dominant in asking questions. We should know prior to that, these newspaper reporters, they do their homework on who they are interviewing, to give newspaper reports. So obviously they knew about Srila Prabhupada and what he has accomplished as the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So the male newspaper reporter, he wanted controversial news about ISKCON. In other words, something that will sell the newspaper as the headline on the front of the newspaper. So he asked Srila Prabhupada a question to the effect, which is in Hindi, but I'm paraphrasing as I heard it from Srinathji Prabhu. He asked Srila Prabhupada, he said, Swamiji, I heard in your movement, the ISKCON movement, that women are always kept in the background. They are given like second level tier status, whereas the men are always in the foreground. Is this how you treat women? So this intrigued the other reporters also. So the female newspaper reporter, she was kind of more favorable to ISKCON and to Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada noticed that. So then he asked this sort of challenging reporter, the administrative affairs of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the Minister of Education? So the male newspaper reporter was quite confused. And then he just couldn't answer like that. So immediately the female newspaper reporter answered. He said, Swamiji, I know. And in Hindi she said, Saraswati, Mother Saraswati. So, Prabhupada looked at the male newspaper reporter and said, you didn't know and she knows? So she's better than you. Then he asked the question again to the male newspaper reporter. So who is the Minister of Defense in the universal administration? Again, he didn't know. He was fumbling. He didn't know his own culture, in a sense. So again, the female newspaper reporter replied, Swamiji, I know. And he asked who? He said, Mother Durga. Prabhupada said, yes. Mother Durga is the Minister of Defense and Saraswati is the Minister of Education. And then Srila Prabhupada asked again to the male newspaper reporter, who is the Minister of Finance? Well, that he knew. He said, well, Mother Lakshmi Devi. Prabhupada said, yes. And then Prabhupada said, and you are challenging us that we don't honor female-bodied people? Here we see that Krishna himself, through Vishnu, is giving these services to great demigoddesses, to Lakshmi, to Saraswati, and to Durga. And Srila Prabhupada said, in any government, the Prime Minister is important. But next to the Prime Minister, these three ministers of defense, of education for propaganda, and for finance are equally important to the Prime Minister. So then later on, after the newspaper reporters left, like that, so Prabhupada came back to he was in his quarters, but they left and other devotees came to Prabhupada and they heard this and they heard it translated into English by those who knew Hindi and English. So one devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, where does Radharani fit in? Because you said the Minister of Defense is Durga, the Minister of Education is Saraswati, the Minister of Finance is Lakshmi. So where does Radharani fit? Prabhupada said, Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister is the Queen of Bhakti. She is the personification of the best form of devotional service. So that is Srimati Radharani's position, that she controls Krishna. I'm not sure how much time I have. Can somebody fill me in before I continue? Then I can probably take some comments and questions and then continue with, and then finally conclude with a beautiful anecdote from Srila Prabhupada later on. So can somebody help me with time from your side? How many more minutes? Hare Krishna, tell me.
Yes, Maharaj. You can go on for another 10-15 minutes with your presentation, then we'll take some questions.
That means the questions are included in the 10-15 minutes or more time than after that?
That is separate, Maharaj.
Okay, so I can go for another 10, then take questions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's full of ecstatic verses about Srimati Radharani. And in the Adi Lila, in the same particular chapter, which gives so much about Srimati Radharani, in chapter 4, Radharani is described as Paramadevata. And Paramadevata, Devi means a demigoddess, but no goddess is called Paramadevata, the supreme goddess. So that's another name for Srimati Radharani, Paramadevata, the supreme goddess. Why? Srila Prabhupada says, because she is worshipable by all the other goddesses and demigoddesses. Radharani is worshipped as such. And she protects them all. And therefore Radharani in that sense is the mother even of the entire universes, unlimited number of universes. Then Srila Prabhupada says she has another beautiful name, Srimati Radharani, Sarva Lakshmi. She's not just Lakshmi, but she's Sarva Lakshmi, which means that Srimati Radharani is the source of all Lakshmis, of all the goddesses of fortune, in that sense. And Sarva Lakshmi also indicates that Srimati Radharani, she fully represents all the opulences of Krishna, all 6 opulences of Krishna. So therefore, she is the supreme energy that emanates from Krishna that gives Krishna pleasure. Now, we may be aware to some extent that the name Radha or Radharani, it does not, you could say, kind of really appear in the Srimad Bhagavata. But it appears in a hidden way, So when Srila Prabhupada was giving a lecture on Radhastami in Montreal way early in 1968, he said that Radha, and this name may not be found sometimes in the Srimad Bhagavata. But then he says, but they do not know how to see and look for that name. And Srila Prabhupada says the words, Anayara Aditaha, which indicates that there are many gopis. And amongst all the gopis, this particular gopi, which is mentioned in this way, that she's the one that knows how to serve and love Krishna the best. She serves Krishna more pleasingly than any other gopis. Anayara Aradita. Therefore, Radha's name is there within the Srimad Bhagavatam, but it is sort of kind of hidden in a sense. And I'll just read the verse for you. How is it hidden? Ana ya ara adito nunam Bhagavan Hari Ishvaraha Yano Vihaya Govinda Pritoyam Anayad Raha. This indicates that this particular gopi, Srimati Radharani, has perfectly worshipped Krishna, who is the all-powerful Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda. And Krishna was so pleased with her worship that he abandoned the rest of the gopis during the Rasa Leela, and he just brought Srimati Radharani to a secluded place. So why would Krishna do such a thing to one particular person? And therefore that person is known from that point on as Radha. Radha means one who gives the greatest pleasure, from the word Anaya, Araditaha. That's how we get the word Radha and Radharani. Now, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he explains that this Araditaha refers directly actually to Srimati Radharani. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he also comments that Sukadeva Goswami was narrating the Srimad Bhagavatam to Maharaj Parikshit. He tried his best, to keep Srimati Radharani's name hidden, not to expose her name. That means how much exalted is this personality that you can keep her name secretly hidden in one's heart. And it's not just for exposition to anyone and everyone. But he couldn't help himself. Krishna Chakravarti Thakur says that Sukadeva Goswami, he shines forth from the moonlight rays of his mouth, Sukha, like the parrot. And he shines forth and he hides this name in this word Araditaha. Therefore, it is indeed, you could say, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that Radharani wanted to expose herself through the lips of Sukadeva Goswami. And this is a great fortune upon us all, that Krishna's intimate associate has borne forth from his own desire to experience pleasure, has come out to the world. Although it's such an intimate, you could say, personality in Krishna's transcendental company. Very important understanding. Then in the same chapter, in the Adi Lila chapter 4, there's a beautiful verse, Krishna Vancha, Puti Rupa Kare Aradane, Ateva Radhika Nama Purane Vakane. Here, her worship, indicating Aradhana, Srimati Radharani, consists of only fulfilling the desires of Lord Krishna. And therefore, the Puranas called her a Radhika. So the name Radha is actually derived from the root word Aradhana, which means one who knows how to worship and love Krishna the best. And that personality who excels all others in worshipping and serving Krishna, that personality may exclusively be called, in relation to Krishna alone, Radhika, the greatest servant. Now there's a difference, although the personality is the same. The name Radha or Radharani is for us all. Because from the fire, you get the heat. Now the heat is touching us all so that we can temperamentally associate with fire through the heat. But when Krishna wants to associate with Radharani, who's like the heat, Krishna is like the fire. When it comes to Srimati Radharani, that name, when Krishna comes to Srimati Radharani, that name is called Radhika. But when Radharani wants to come to us and accept our service to offer to Krishna, her name is Srimati Radharani. So this name Radhika, Radha, Radhika, comes from the name Radha and Ika. It's like an exclusive belongingness to Krishna. Beautiful, very intimate name, Srimati Radhika, in that way. Now, it's quite interesting that we know these famous names of Srimati Radharani. And in the Madhya Lila in chapter 13, I mean in chapter 13, there's beautiful verses there also. Vraja Vasi Yata Jana Mata Pita Sakajana Gana Sabehaya Mora Prana Sama Tamra Madhya Gopi Gana Shakshad Mora Jivana Tumi Mora Jivanera Jivana. Very beautiful verses. And it's such a wonderful way. Krishna himself is speaking this verse in such an amazing way to his Radhika. Radhika is exclusively to Krishna. And Krishna says in this verses that, Vrajavasi Yata Jana. It indicates that all the inhabitants of Vrajadam, Vrindavan Dham, Mata, Pita, Saka, Gana, that my mother, Yasoda, my father, Nanda Maharaj, and Saka, my coward boyfriends, and everyone else are what? Sabehaya, Mora, Prana, Sama. They are my very life and soul. Prana, Sama, very life and soul. So Krishna himself speaks this verse in Chaitanya, quoted in Chaitanya Chaitamrita. Yeah. And then Krishna says, Tanra Made Gopi Gana, and amongst all the inhabitants of my associates in Vrindavan, the gopis are my very life and soul. Whereas Mother Yasoda, Nanda Maharaj, and the coward boys are my life and soul, Krishna says. But the gopis are my very life and soul. He uses the word that. Very life and soul. That means Tandra and Gopi Gana. And Shakshat Mora Jivana Tumimora Jivanera Jivana. So in other words, the word Jivana is like used 3 times in these last words of these verses like that. And then Krishna himself says, and among the gopis, and he tells you, Srimati Radharani, are the chief. And you're not just my life and soul. And you're not just my very life and soul. But you are Tumimora Jivanera Jivana. And Krishna says that you are the very life of my life. You are the very life of my life. So this is Krishna's direct words. And Srila Prabhupada have us understand in the purport. Beautifully Prabhupada says in that particular purport, I'm paraphrasing, that Srimati Radharani, is the center of all Vrindavan's activities. In Vrindavan, Krishna is the instrument of Srimati Radharani. Not that Srimati Radharani is the instrument of Krishna. So therefore, Madan Mohan and Radharani is Madan Mohan Mohini. And from Krishna's own words, because Krishna is the instrument of Srimati Radharani, from Krishna's own words, he celebrates the name of Srimati Radharani. And he says, Jai Radhe, Jai Radhe, Jai Radhe. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada said, it appears when Krishna says Jai Radhe, that's the new mantra for the residents of Vrindavan, Jai Radhe. And then it appears in that sense that Radharani becomes the queen of Vrindavan. And Krishna is simply a decoration by saying Jai Radhe, Jai Radhe, Jai Radhe. So this is how Srila Prabhupada explains nicely in that particular purport to this verse in the Madhya Lila. So I shall take some questions now from anyone. If some questions are written, then possibly Sachi Sutta Prabhu or Prabhupada Dev, can, speak the questions to me. But if somebody is on the Zoom itself, and if you want to come onto the video and ask the question directly, you're welcome to do so. And then at the end, I'll conclude with another anecdote of Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much for your wonderful presentation this morning, and very interesting angle, which is always your style, I think. I saw Paramahansa Prabhu turn on his video just now, and Shanta Vigra Prabhu, I think, have questions. Shanta Vigra Prabhu, you want to ask your question now?
Hare Krishna.
Paramahansa Prabhu? Shanta Vigra Prabhu, you can go ahead.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, by some Bismillah, glory to Srila Prabhupada. You mentioned in the class that particular verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, that for the most part, Radharani's name is not given in the Srimad Bhagavatam, but somehow by her mercy, Shukadeva Goswami was able to speak it in a disguised way for the benefit of everyone. Is there any particular reason?
Yeah, but Prabhupada never disguised it. He brought it up.
Yes. Is there any particular reason or reasons given why Shukadeva Goswami would not have spoken Srimati Radharani's name outright?
Yes, there are various reasons. Beautiful question. Very intimate question. I appreciate your nice question in this way. There are reasons. One of the reasons is that Shukadeva Goswami, when he mentions the name of Srimati Radharani coming out from his mouth, then he stops speaking. In other words, he gets into ecstasy. So he tried to control himself that he can continue to speak, the Srimad Bhagavata Maharaj Parikshit. So therefore he tried to sort of hide it in some words, that when he just says Radha or Radhika, he may fall down in ecstasy. So that's one reason. The other reason is that You know, Sukadev Goswami is such an exalted personality that Srila Sukadev Goswami feels that he's not qualified to even mention her name. Because, you know, her name, you know, that personality only belongs to Krishna. It doesn't belong to Sukadev Goswami. So that's his deep humility. In another way, his deep humility. In another way. So these are like two reasons now that I can share with you. And another reason that I can share, which is like kind of, I know I'm not saying it because I'm saying it, but just that it's sometimes there's a kind of realization that one has, but don't like kind of categorize me, you know, in an exalted way. I'm not like that at all, you know. Yeah. Another reason is that Srimati Radharani is the, you know, is like the I would say like the private consciousness of Krishna. It's like the private, intimate consciousness of Krishna. Srimati Radharani is none different from Krishna because she emanates from Krishna just as heat emanates from fire or the sunrise or sunshine emanates from the sun, and just as fragrance emanates from musk. So she is the private personal side of the consciousness of Krishna. Is that all right, Shanta Vigraha Prabhu, for now?
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much, Antavigra Prabhu. Paramatra Prabhu, you have a question?
Yeah. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for the enlivening presentation this morning, which was filled with so many esoteric points.
I can hear you. Can you come a little lower so I can see you full darshan? That's better. Thank you. Well, nice to see you again, Paramatma.
Nice seeing you this. Okay. Very enlivening to have you this morning. Many esoteric points you mentioned, much appreciated. I remember you started off by saying that Radha's husband, Abhimanyu, is Krishna's shadow. And I was reflecting on that, not only now, but for some time back, and I'm a little bewildered with that. First of all, the word shadow in Sanskrit means, it's translated as chaya. And chaya means shadow, which is sometimes called Maya. So I was thinking that, you know, having heard all this, if Abhimanyu is actually an illusory form of Krishna, how can we understand, you know, his position? Question one. Question two, very quickly. It is also mentioned that to increase rasa,
let's get to the first one. Let me answer your first one. Am I on the screen? I'm not sure if I'm on the screen.
Yeah, you're clear, middle of the screen, Mark, very clear.
Fine. Now, there's a difference between the word Maya and Chaya and Rati. So there's another word called Rati Abbas. So you get the word Rupa and you get the word Abbas Rupa. So I've used various terms now. You use the word term Maya and you use the word term Chaya. But you didn't use the word Rati and you didn't use the word Abbas and you didn't use the word Rupa. Okay? So Krishna is Rupa, R-U-P-A. Krishna is the form, Rupa. Abbas Rupa means it's a form of Krishna that comes from Krishna, but it's not Krishna. So it's not Maya. The closest English word to Abbas Rupa, which is called the form of Abhimanyu, it's called either a reflection or a shadow. Now, the shadow can only exist, or the reflection can only exist, the Abbas, if there's a Rupa. If there's a Rupa. Whereas with Maya, we are separate from Krishna's service. You understand? When we are in Maya, we're not serving Krishna. But when the reflection of the shadow is connected to Krishna, to serve Krishna, that is Abhimanyu, to give pleasure to Krishna. Now that's the simplest way I can explain it to you now.
Great answer, Maharaj. Great answer. That explained. I mean, I was always confused. Thank you. Quickly.
One more thing.
Hmm.
Abhimanyu does not exist in Goloka Vrindavan. Abhimanyu only exists as a personality in Gokul Vrindavan, Boma Vrindavan, here, when Krishna appears here. But in Goloka Vrindavan, there's no Abhimanyu. But Radharani has a feeling that she's married, but she doesn't know who that person is. Just like in Goloka Vrindavan, there's no demons. But here you get your Putana. But there's a feeling in Goloka Vrindavan that the demon may come, but there's only a feeling, but there's no demon. I just thought I'd explain that. Now, what's your next question? Please go ahead.
It is said that to increase rasa, Srimati Radharani expands into the gopis of Vrindavan.
Yes.
Can you explain this a little? I mean, this is also
Okay.
Srimati
Radharani is a kripa, which is the Bhakti Lata beach. Kripa means, the Lata beach means a kripa. This is given in verses in Chaitanya Charitamrita. If I can reference for you, I can't do it immediately. Is that all right?
All right.
But Srimati Radharani is the main kripa of devotional service. Kripa, Bhakti Lata beach. Yeah. So the kripa of devotional service engages in giving pleasure, which is Krishna, which is Srimati Radharani, engaged in giving pleasure to Krishna, which is like the trunk of the tree. And the kripa, goes onto the trunk. Now the kripa has leaves. The kripa has flowers. So the different gopis are expansions of Srimati Radharani, just as you have leaves and flowers on the kripa. But Radharani is the main kripa of love of Krishna. That's the analogy given. Without the main kripa, it will never give forth, never project leaves or even flowers. So the leaves and the flowers on the kripa, comes forth from the kripa itself, which is Srimati Radharani. So the leaves and flowers are the gopis, which expands from Srimati Radharani.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maharaj.
A very nice question so far. 2 questions from Shanta Vigraha Prabhu and Paramatma Prabhu. Thank you for enlivening me by asking nice questions like that. All right. Next.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. There's a question from Facebook from Vishal Badraisan, devotee from ISKCON Saranam. So the question is as follows. What should be our mood on Radhastami? And what is the best prayer to offer to Srimati Radharani on this day?
Nice question. The best prayer is, and will always be the best prayer, is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That's the best prayer. So on Radharani's appearance day, if we can increase our chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra both in Japa and Kirtan, that's the best way to serve Srimati Radharani. And the best way to serve Srimati Radharani is to serve Krishna by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, which includes Srimati Radharani as the name Hare, and it includes Krishna as the names Krishna and Rama. Is that all right?
Thank you very much, Maharaj. I hope that the devotee from Saranam will be excited to hear that will always be the prayer. eternal prayer. Marge, there are two other persons that are raising their hands, and I know you still have your conclusion. I have a question.
I have time, but if you have time, that's fine with me. I'm okay with time.
Yes, Marge, we have at least 20 minutes or so.
All right, go ahead.
So, Marge, my question is twofold. One level from your verse that you read from Chaitanya Charitamrita, and also within your discussions. And we constantly hear that Radha and Krishna is non-different. However, when we see them on the altar or when we think of them, we think of two personality. We think of Krishna as a male personality. We think of Radharani as a female personality. And then when it comes to Chaitanya Charitamrita, so that's one level of my question. How do we see them as two personality, as non-different? And then when we come to Chaitanya Charitamrita.
I'll answer that now.
Okay, yes, Maharaj, go ahead.
I hope I'm not interjecting too much, but you have two parts to it. So let me answer this first part for you. Yeah. You see, the difficulty is that it's not in relation to your question as such. But Prabhupada says very clearly that these two personalities, Radha and Krishna, are a great mystery. It's actually mysterious. Yeah. And that which is mysterious, you cannot put a handle on it. You cannot really understand it fully. That makes them the supreme couple. That's one little answer I'm giving you in relation. The second answer in relation to the question, the first part, is that there should not be. I don't know how to say it, but I have to say it in the most sensitive way, as I can. Because there's a tendency for us all that even if we haven't experienced it as a sannyasi myself, I'm from brahmacharya, I just took sannyas, but still we can see that the whole material world is running on attraction between male and female. See? And Srila Prabhupada, in the preface to the Krishna book, right in the first paragraph, he said that some person may ask, and who is Krishna? And the next question they may ask, and who is the girl standing next to Krishna? See? So, because there's a relative experience of attraction and association and activity between male and female, we all know what that is, There may be a tendency sometimes that we may have a question on the same basis in terms of Radha and Krishna because of some relative experience in the material world. And I know you're asking a question for the benefit of the world, which is actually a very important question that you're asking, in this way. However, in the spiritual nature, okay, before I say that, I just want to qualify what Prabhupada said. So Prabhupada said that, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu within each universe, he gives birth to Brahma on the lotus flower, that emanates from his navel as the stem of the lotus flower. And Prabhupada says that Lakshmi Devi, is massaging Garbhodakshaya Vishnu's feet. But Lord Brahma was not born because of association of Lakshmi Devi and Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. See? In other words, the mother and father of Brahma is Vishnu. It's not Lakshmi and Vishnu. See? So, in other words, Krishna is everything. Krishna can be mother, he can be father, he can be a fish as Matsya avatar, Krishna can appear as, half man, half lion, as Nrsimhadev, like that. So it is not difficult for Krishna to want to enjoy his own potency. See? But when Radha appears to us here, that is the explanation that Radharani is the pleasure potency of Krishna. But in Goloka Vrindavan, Radharani does not really expand from Krishna because the family there is eternal. It's not that Radharani didn't exist at one time and then Krishna expanded into Srimati Radharani to enjoy transcendental pleasure. That's not the case in Goloka Vrindavan. But it may appear to be the case here of how they appear in this world to attract us by their pastimes when they come here, to go to Goloka Vrindavan. It's as if saying that, if you tell Mother Yasoda in Goloka Vrindavan, when was Krishna born to you? In Goloka Vrindavan. Mother Yasoda may take a transcendental broomstick and she may whip you and say, get out of my house. How can you say this boy was born to me? He's my eternal, he's my son always. So similarly, Radharani is the eternal principle in its practicality to give pleasure to Krishna. So therefore she's called Ladini Shakti. So it's not that the Ladini Shakti existed first. Radharani is the source of the Ladini Shakti in Goloka Vrindavan. But that Ladini Shakti may appear as an expansion of Krishna when they appear in this universes where we are, to attract us back to go to Goloka Vrindavan. So Srila Prabhupada calls those appearances as Nara Leela. Nara means human-like. See? Now my final explanation of this. I'm just going to use you as an example. Is that all right? Prabhupada there? Yeah.
Yes,
now you are wearing the dress of a female body or male body. What is it? Male body, right?
Yes, Maharaj.
And any Mataji there is wearing the dress of a female body. But for how long?
Few years.
Yes. Death will come and take that body, and the soul may take either a male or female body in the next life. See? So what is the gender of the soul? In this life, your body is male, but you have the soul within the body. In your next life, the body may be female, but you're the same soul. See? So what is the gender of the soul in the spiritual world? Is it male or female? Whereas we can prove in this world that you may have a male body, but the soul has a gender. It may not be that body, because in the next life you may take a female body or another species of life. You may not be that. See? So then it comes to the question, what is the gender of the soul? The gender of the soul is simply one thing. Jivara Swarupai Krishna Ranityadas. The soul is an eternal servant of the servants of the servants of Radharani, who is the intimate servant of Krishna. So when we use the word, he or she, we are indicating some gender here, male or female, right? Yeah. But actually it is not really like that. Just as you may have a male body and you're the soul, but in your next life you may not have the male body, you may have a female body and you're still the soul. So the soul does not have this gender in Goloka Vrindavan. It only has one gender. Gopi Bhatta Pada Kamalaya Dasa Dasa Anudas. It has the gender of being the eternal servant of the servants of the servants of the servants of Krishna. But from our relative experience, for the sake of philosophy and for the sake of explanation, we may say, even in my talk today, I may say, oh Radharani, she is so beautiful. Oh Krishna, he is so attractive. So I'm using the words he and she in my lecture also to all of us here. But that is kind of like a relative experience to come to an absolute situation. Absolute situation. So, I'll give you another example. Your question is amazingly wonderful, actually. I'll give another example. The mother Yasoda may apparently be a mother. Mother Yasoda, you could say, like I would say that she has the form of parental love, of motherly love for Krishna. See? So the soul is not, you could say, in the material world, you are the soul, but your body is different from the soul. But Mother Yasoda, the form of Mother Yasoda is the soul. And that form is a form of loving devotional service as a mother. Now, we may term the mother she, but in the spiritual world, Mother Yasoda is the form of Krishna Prema. She's loving Krishna, which is different from our material body here. So therefore, the eternal identity of the soul is to love Krishna. And the loving Krishna may have different forms of love to love Krishna, as a gopi, cowherd boy, even as a blade of grass, even as a kalpa vriksha tree. I'm giving these various explanations as simply as possible, but I'm trying my best to serve you. What's your next part of your question?
Yes.
Is it okay, the first part so far?
I will have to listen back this record again and again. It's quite more than what I expected. Your angle is always mind-boggling, how you think and how you answer these questions, Maharaj. A similar question is there. When we go into Chaitanya Charitamrita, we learn that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and in our case here, we are going to celebrate Radhastami. We have on our altar Sri Sri Paramakarana Nitai Gaurachandra, Lord Chaitanya or Lord Nityananda deities. But then we learn from scriptures also that Lord Chaitanya is a combined form of Radha and Krishna. How do we relate to Lord Chaitanya on Radhastami, for example, or in general?
Well, that's a question you have asked, and I can speak on hours for it, but I cannot even summarize it properly also, if you want me to summarize it. Yeah. Srila Prabhupada says in the Chaitanya, in teachings of Lord Chaitanya, that when Krishna wants to experience Radharani's love for Krishna, and I said earlier on in my talk today that the sun cannot experience its own sunshine, and fire cannot experience its own heat that emanates from the fire. You can understand that so far? That the heat is not experienced by the fire, and the source of the heat is the fire itself. So similarly, Radharani's love is not called prema. Radharani's love for Krishna is called Krishna prema. So when Krishna wants to love, he cannot love himself. See? Krishna cannot love Krishna. So Krishna has to love somebody who's other than himself, and that is called Krishna Prema. So when Krishna wants to feel to love, that is prema. But the possessor of prema must be loving Krishna. So therefore Krishna prema. So Krishna prema is more powerful than Krishna. Just as the heat is more powerful than the fire. Because you cannot directly associate with fire. So because Krishna does not have love for himself, the possessor or personification of the love is the form of Srimati Radharani. So therefore he feels incomplete. And in order to feel complete, he desires to feel how Radharani feels for him. He desires to feel how Radharani loves him. And he desires to become Srimati Radharani. Heat cannot be withdrawn from fire. Fire by its nature will always give heat. Okay? So when that heat is extinguished, then it extinguishes the fire. So Krishna is no more Krishna. Krishna Vanam Krishna Krishna. Sangapanga Shapashada. See? In other words, that Krishna is not now our Krishna. He does not exist as Krishna. And when Krishna does not exist as Krishna, Radharani cannot exist because her very life is the existence of Krishna to serve him. So when Krishna enters into the consciousness of Radharani to feel her love for him, he transforms into Lord Chaitanya, where the two become one. But actually, Krishna himself becomes one in the mood of Srimati Radharani, and that's the form of Lord Chaitanya. Then Radharani feels, oh, where is my Krishna? Then she exposes herself in the form of a natural verse that she cries out in great distress and depression and in separation. Aslisyava padaratam pinastumam adashana mamahatam karotuva yatatata vaviddato lampato matpananatastu saeva napara. This verse is originally spoken by Srimati Radharani and given to us in the Shishastakam as the apex verse by Lord Chaitanya. And originally spoken by Srimati Radharani is given as proof in the 20th chapter of the final chapter of the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita in the Antya-lila. You can read it there. Now, what does this mean? Radharani feels that somebody has taken a love for Krishna from her, and that is Krishna only himself. So therefore she feels bereft of Krishna. Adashanam, you're no more there. Mama hatam karotova, you are killing me, that I cannot love you anymore, that I cannot serve you anymore. So when she speaks this verse, then she transforms, and she does not exist as Radha. And she transforms and appears as Gadadhar Pandit. So therefore, at times in our Gaudiya Vaishnava line, you'll feel that in our Gaudiya Vaishnava temples sometimes we worship Gaur Gadadhar. Gaura means Lord Chaitanya and Gadadhar. So that's my sort of explanation for that. But in relation to Lord Nityananda and Lord Chaitanya, when people want to bring, when devotees want to bring Radha back to Krishna, they worship Gaur Gadadhar. But when they want to give love to Krishna to the world, they worship Chaitanya Nitai, Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. This is just a summary. There's a lot of detail to explain this further, but right now it's a summary.
Thank you very much, Maharaj. I totally understand. Thank you very much. I can imagine, and I wish that we have another forum where we can discuss more in depth, in detail. I saw Rajesh Prabhu is there. Rajesh Prabhu, you have something?
Hare Krishna, just like to offer my humble obeisances to Maharaj and thank him for making his wonderful appearance. Thank you very much, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Rishi, thank you very much for giving me your darshan. I always look forward to your nice association when I come to Trinidad also. Thank you very much.
Maharaj.
So thank you very much, Rajesh Prabhu. We will take one final question from Achala Prabhu. Achala Prabhu, you can please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Achala, I can't see you. Can you put your video on? I cannot see you. Tell me.
Hare Krishna
Nice.
Maharaj.
How are you?
I'm good, Hare Krishna.
Tell me.
In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's that verse, Hare Krishna is eternally one, but they separate themselves to enjoy. So can we apply Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva as in Radha Krishna being one and different? Because generally it is said Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva in relation to the Jiva and Krishna. So can we apply that to Radha Krishna?
It actually emanates from that. That's the source of the Achintya Bheda Abheda Tattva. The Radha and Krishna are one, and simultaneously they are two for the sake of enjoyment, or rasa or lila. Or sometimes Prabhupada says for the sake of play. Now I'm just I'll put more emphasis on the word play. See? When we see two children, like one boy and the neighbor is a girl, children, and like not more than 8-9 years of age. When you see these two children play, do you think anything that's like wrong in that? When you see two little children, one boy and girl play like that.
No.
In fact, you'll only see a purity of innocence. But if they grown up adults, and they play in public, you won't see a purity of innocence. Right? So therefore, Radha and Krishna, when they play, it is like that. It is like a little boy and a little girl at play. There's a purity of innocence. There's no sort of like material desires to enjoy, like gross sense gratification. They just play as a little boy and as a little girl. Now that's kind of eternal in Goloka Vrindavan. So in other words, when they come here, they seem to appear. And when one becomes two, and then two becomes one as Lord Chaitanya. So that's when they appear here. So I want to also further understand your question. So tell me further.
Myself and this other devotee were having a discussion, and as I said before, the devotee said that Achintya Bheda Bheda cannot be used for Radha Krishna, simultaneous, one and different, only for the Jiva and Krishna, or Krishna's material energy and Krishna. So, and my argument was that I said could be used. You could use Achintya Bheda Bheda for Radharani and Krishna being one and different. So, my question is that, can you use Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva?
Yes, Krishna is Akila Rasamrita Murti. Akila Rasamrita Murti in the method of devotion means that Krishna is the source of everything. So why can't Krishna be the source of Achintya Bheda Abheda Tattva? Krishna is the source of everything. He is Sarva Karana Karanam. He is Janmadi Asya Yataha. Everything emanates from Krishna, including Achintya Bheda Abheda Tattva, including Siddhanta. Everything comes from Krishna. So now, I'll give you another simple example. So Achala, you are the son of Shriman who? Your father, what's his name? I'm trying to give an example here.
My father?
Yeah, what's your father's name?
Sugrim.
Sukadev. Okay, your father's name is Sukadev, right? So Shriman Sukadev and Achala, Achala is the son and Sriman Sukadev is the father. Now, are you your father? Yes or no? Is your father you? Yes or no? But where did you come from? How was you born? How did you
My
take
father.
birth? Yeah. So in other words, you take the surname of the father, although you are not the father. So you're one with the father as the son, but simultaneously you're not the father, you are the son. For example, if your father needs to be represented, right? You can take his place and represent him because you are the son. So that's one with. And different from means you are not the father, but you're the son. It's the same way. Are we all right? But that originally emanates from Radha and Krishna.
Yes.
And therefore, Lord Chaitanya has given us the philosophy, Achintya Bheda, Abheda Tattva. It's not that Lord Chaitanya is not Krishna, but is in the covered form as a devotee. So Lord Chaitanya is giving the philosophy of one with and different from, which is Radha and Krishna. And similarly, you can apply throughout in our devotional lives. It's not a question of who does that principle of the philosophy apply to, but I'm answering your question of the source of that. The source of that is Lord Chaitanya. Achintya Bheda Abheda Tattva. And the source of Lord Chaitanya is the combined form of Radha and Krishna. We all read so far, just like your father is there and you are there. But the source of you coming to this world is your father. But at the same time, you're not your father. So when your father tells you something, then you learn that and you repeat it to your son. So the source of Achintya Bheda Abheda Tattva is Radha and Krishna. But when they become one as Lord Chaitanya, then Lord Chaitanya brings forth the philosophy of Achintya Bheda Abheda Tattva, which we follow. It's a little bit technical, but that's how it is for now.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much. I'm sorry that that's the amount of time we have for question and answer. Maharaj, your final message and Radhastami, Pre-Radhastami encouragement for the devotees. Whatever you would like to tell us, please go ahead.
I'll just say two little points. One is that, not little, but it could take a few more minutes. One is that I'm in Mauritius, and Mauritius is probably one of the few islands or little countries that is COVID-19 free. We don't have any COVID-19 here for the last 3 months. And I did over 15 programs in ISKCON temples and public halls. One public hall, I did a program, 800 people came in a small island of Mauritius. So I'm just letting you know, somehow there's some good fortune in this island. We are COVID-19 free in a way. So that's one thing. That's why I don't do so much Zoom classes as I used to do during the lockdown. And now I want to give a final anecdote from Srila Prabhupada. His Holiness Giriraj Swami recalls that when the devotees first went to India, they rented a place in Calcutta. And we still have that place in Calcutta at Albert Road, where we have our deities, Shri Radha Govinda. But at that time, the place was rented by ISKCON in the early days. And the landlord who owned that building, his name is Mr. Rai, like Ramananda Rai, Mr. Rai. He was, but you could say in one sense, he was a Vaishnava from birth, and he also knew Lord Chaitanya and the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. Yeah. So by chance once, one early disciple of Prabhupada named Achyutananda Swami, he met Mr. Rai somewhere, not at the place that we rented. Now we own the place at Albert Road. ISKCON owns the place. So Mr. Rai felt that he is a Bengali, and Mr. Rai felt is also a devotee of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he felt that he should like sort of reveal his own consciousness to Achyutananda Swami about the confidential truth of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he said that actually Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is greater than Radha and Krishna. And he is sweeter and is more beautiful. And Mr. Rai compared Lord Chaitanya to a Rasagulla, sweet, Rasagulla. And he said that although the Rasagulla is made of milk and sugar, but still Rasagulla is greater than milk and sugar. And therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is greater than Radha and Krishna. He is the original, and from him come Radha and Krishna. So in other words, he indicated that Krishna is like the milk, Srimati Radharani is the sugar, and when you combine them, you get Rasagulla with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Achyutananda Swami was a little confused about this. Okay. But he didn't want to also challenge the person because he's our landlord. So, and Achyutananda Swami and the devotees at that time were very new to India, and they didn't really know much. So it sounded very nice and very poetic and esoteric. So Achyutananda went to Srila Prabhupada, and after repeating what the landlord said, Achyutananda Swami asked Srila Prabhupada whether Radha and Krishna come first or Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes first. So Srila Prabhupada replied, Radha and Krishna come first. And Srila Prabhupada used the same analogy. He said, just like first there is milk and sugar, but they exist separately. And then they combine to make Rasagulla. Then Achyutananda Swami asked Srila Prabhupada, now I'm confused still, but who is greater? Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or Lord Krishna? Then Srila Prabhupada paused for a moment and then replied that Srimati Radharani is the greatest. And therefore, she is greater than Krishna. So then Srila Prabhupada said that Krishna had to come into the position of Srimati Radharani to understand her greatness. And therefore he came as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Then Srila Prabhupada, in the room with Achyutananda Swami in Calcutta, Srila Prabhupada pointed to a picture on the wall of Srimati Radharani in a mood of being angry, which is called Man, and she's sitting on a raised platform. Like that. And then Lord Krishna is kneeling at the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani, trying to pacify her from her angry mood of Man, and begging Srimati Radharani to accept him again. And Srila Prabhupada said, see, just see. Srila Prabhupada said, who is greater? And Srila Prabhupada said, just see, Radharani is greater because Krishna is bowing down to her and begging her forgiveness to make her angry. Then Srila Prabhupada, he pointed to another picture in the room. And he showed how Krishna is carrying the wooden sandals of Nanda Maharaj, his father, on his head. And then Srila Prabhupada said, just see, Nanda Maharaj is greater because Krishna is carrying Nanda Maharaj's shoes on his head. And then Srila Prabhupada said, you should know that the devotee is the greatest, and especially Srimati Radharani is the greatest devotee. And then Srila Prabhupada said that all the devotees of Vrindavan can control Krishna. And their love for Krishna is imbued with this Ladini Shakti, Srila Prabhupada said. And that Ladini Shakti is the potency of Radharani that expands into the hearts and consciousness of all the devotees of Vrindavan. And that's how Srimati Radharani is the greatest. Thank you very much. If I get time, we can write to each other like Sachishuta wrote to me, and we can meet again on Zoom in the future. Hare Krishna.
Yes, Maharaj, thank you very much. I would recommend that we have the next session be a question and answer session, that we can plan it out nicely, that that will be convenient for everyone, and we can even have some of the questions be posed from up front, and then we can have some random questions also. So maybe after Radhastami and everything finish, I will update you on that. And definitely we need your association, we need your blessings. And this is a way without, as I said earlier, we didn't have to purchase a ticket to get you here, but you're right in front of us on a big screen TV in our temple. And of course, all the devotees can join in their homes, wherever they are. In this part of the world, the restrictions are still there in Trinidad, in Guyana, and different places. They still have the restriction. Cases are going on. So we are taking our utmost best precaution in terms of our temples and devotees. So thank you very much, Maharaj. Give us your blessings that we will have a wonderful Radhastami celebration. We want to thank all the devotees for their questions. Paramatma Prabhu, Shantavigra Prabhu, Achala Prabhu. Thank you all very much. And we look forward for your association again on Tuesday morning for our Radhastami celebration. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Shri Paramakana Nitai Gaura Chanda ki. So we're going for a beautiful Artik ceremony to their Lordship, Sri Shri Paramakana Nitai Gaura Chandra. You can join us for darshan. Hare Krishna.
Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki.
Jaya Parama Karuna Jaya Nitai Gaura Chandra Jaya Parama Karuna Jaya Nitai Gaura Chandra.
Nitai Gaura Chandra Parama Karuna Jaya Nitai Gaura Chandra.